Now we're going to move on to the next presentation, which focuses on, again, digital twinning and the development of a DMA real-time pipeline hydraulic simulator. So I'm going to welcome Glyn Adicott, Operations Director, Hydraulic Analysis Group Limited, David Gable, Project Delivery Manager, Thames Water, and Sarah Bananther, Project Manager, Morrison Utility Services. So the twin incorporates PRVs, DM flows, smart meter data, and GPRS pressure loggers. The twin is also driven by transient pressure data to reduce new leakage by identifying the source and cause of the transients, so remedial measures can be implemented. The twin was used to reconfigure the DMA and to reduce existing leakage by incorporating acoustic logger data into the twin. So I haven't, hopefully I haven't just stolen your thunder there, but I'll hand over to you now to tell us a little bit more.
The digital twin trial that we run in Thames Water in an area in South London. So our digital twin is a simulated copy of our network. It shows the water going in, how it moves, how the network pressures are changed, and how using the pressures can simulate or assess if something isn't quite right. The engine calculates, and Glyn will talk about this a bit later on, but the engine calculates the pressure it should see and then highlights if it doesn't see it. So if there's delta, and then works backwards to establish why that isn't why. So it could be leakage, could be demand, it could be a whole raft of reasons, and we'll talk about a few of those later as well. It could be absolutely anything on those. In our customer programs team at Thames, we've installed over 500,000 smart meters, and we're installing another 400,000 in the next AMP. We've got a number of pressure loggers across the network as well, but as part of this trial, we installed a number of new NB-IoT loggers. It uses our fleet of acoustic loggers, so we've currently got 26,000 acoustic sound loggers deployed. And it also looks at things like temperature and any other inputs we like. So our SCADA data, for example, from our water treatment works, our pressure data from our PRVs, it incorporates every single sensor that we've already got. And that's the key bit for our model, is that it uses all the data that we've got already. Apart from a small number of added pressure loggers, everything else is data that we've already captured. So we're not installing millions of pounds of new assets or millions of pounds of anything. It uses what we've got already, and that's one of the key benefits for us. It's a smart digital twin without spending the smart digital twin money that we've heard so much about. And our trial was in a DMA in South London called Oxley's Wood. Now it's a part of London near Deptford. In Lewisham/Deptford, and it's very hilly. As you can see on the map, it doesn't really do it justice, but there's quite some high points there. You've got Telegraph Hill, and you've got the Greenwich Observatory just on the outside of it as well. So it's quite a hilly part of London. Very high pressures, very low pressures, very low areas. So it's very topographic and right for pressure management. And the twin utilises the data coupled with the existing data sets. So we had a lot of high leakage reoccurrence in here, and we'll talk a bit about that later as well. A lot of high pressures and a lot of pressure transients that people had always anecdotally blamed leakage on, but didn't really know where they were coming from or why it was until we started doing our digital trial. And within days of starting the trial, we found our first issue, our very first transient pressure wave going through the DMA. And Sir Ruben will talk a bit about that as well. Sir Ruben?
Thank you, David. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm hoping you're enjoying today's session. It's quite nice to hear all the lovely presentations going ahead. So I'm just going to briefly outline how we built the digital twin. So it starts off with basically incorporating our GIS shapefiles from Thames Water and importing it into our software BerrySim. And what we had to do is to go through a process of correcting a lot of errors within the shapefile. So there's a lot of floating pipes which need to be hydraulically connected so that the DMA actually works hydraulically. Now, one of the big things about the digital twin, which we've created, is it's mainly powered through our smart meter data. So this DMA is covered with about 25% of smart metering data, or 25% of the customers within this DMA have smart meters. And we not only incorporated those meters into the digital twin, but we also have what we call bulk meters, which are high density property meters, along with our district meter, flow meters, all incorporated into one place. This DMA is also pressure managed, so it has 3 inputs flowing into the DMA, and each of those inputs have a PRV. So we're able to actually incorporate the functionality of the PRVs within the digital twin to sort of model the control functions and see how the control affects the DMA. And then what we did here, which you can see in the green dots on the screen with the black squares around it, we also installed about 8 pressure loggers strategically around the DMAs to really look or pressure deltas, which my colleague Lynn will come on to next, to pick up potential areas of leakage, but also things like shut valves and other anomalies which could be causing problems within this DMA. So over to you, Glenn.
Okay, thank you, Sir Ruben. So first of all, basically our twin, it's a very powerful tool. So first of all, we'll talk about the actual model. So there's been lots of talk about software models, hydraulic models. The difference between VeriSim and other packages on the market is they're steady state models. They'll capture a snapshot of data and try and evaluate with this. Ours is a transient simulator, so a surge analysis model. And HAL, or Hydraulic Analysis Limited, we work for all the UK water companies on surge analysis. We have done for 50 years, so we have models all over the UK. But it's effectively a filter. So we throw as much data as you can give into the twin, and it will deal with it, it will handle it, and it then compares what should be happening to what's actually happening, and we can produce some fantastic visuals as well. So first of all, one on the left, which stands out, that's basically a heat map of demand. So this will be running live. This runs live in the Thames Data Factory, and it will show you how your demand changes, in this case over a 24-hour period. The darker the area, the higher the demand. So straight away, it gives you an idea of how your DMA actually operates, and that in itself is really valuable information. The top right screen is, as Ruben mentioned, there's 3 sources into this DMA through 3 separate PRVs, and you can see that the colour represents the source of water, the dark blue, the green, and then on the right hand side the pink. Now interestingly, if you look on the right hand side, you'll see the pink disappears because that PRV shuts at night to allow the other 2 valves to control in a stable manner. So you can actually see where your water comes from and where it goes and mixes within your DMA, and you might have very different water quality and water sources that can explain why the taste of water might change over a period if that was the case. But by far and away, the most powerful part of it is what we call, as David mentioned, the pressure delta. So basically, you input all this data into the twin, and then where the twin doesn't match reality, it flags this issue up. And that could be a blockage, it could be a closed valve, it could be a leakage, it could be anomalies, it could be errors in the build of the data. So basically, it allows you to actually then understand and rectify problems in the network. So next slide, if you can, David. Okay, so how we actually build the twins? Well, first of all, the most important part of this, which is just fantastic, is the actual smart meter data. So Thames have a huge deployment of smart meters, and that provides such valuable information because one of the weak spots of any twin is the customer demand. So, for example, we've had a long-established twin of the whole water supply network of Dubai, but that's driven by billing data, it's estimated data. But what we're able to put into this twin is actual known data. So we actually input our smart data, and in order to avoid modeling every house, we'll effectively group together properties onto nodes within the twin, and that may include smart data and non-smart data. So we amalgamate them into points using something called the Thiessen polygon technique, which I'd never heard of a few years ago. And then the flow data is aggregated at nodal points. So basically we have the flow coming off at various points in the twin. And then, similar to past presentations, what we do then is we compare the model values to actual values. So where you have a leak or a burst breaking out, you will have a change in pressure, and then using the algorithms in the twin and the simulator, we're able to locate the burst and leak. Now, unlike a lot of other products on there, because ours is a transient simulator, we actually model the pressures traveling through the system, the pressure waves. So as a burst occurs, it will travel through the system. We will actually model and propagate that, and that allows us to actually then find and locate the burst by the actual volume of data we process. So, for example, in this twin, we are carrying out thousands of calculations a second. Believe it or not, our twin of the whole of Dubai, it actually has a million pieces of data pass through our twin every minute. So just huge volumes of data, and that's not even including transient pressure data. So you can throw a lot of data at the twin, and then it will show you the output. Okay, the next slide if you can, David. And probably one of the most interesting developments, and we think this is one of the unique functions of our software, is we picked up a number of pressure transients which were entering our DMA from the wider supply system. So if you look at the picture on the left, what our simulator does, it actually models how that pressure transient travels into the DMA and where it goes to. So we might only pick up a transient at one point, but we can actually show how that travels, and you can through the system, and you can look at any one point in your DMA, and you can see what the pressure transient is. Now, the darker the color is the bigger the pressure difference. In this case, it's the pressure difference of the transient that causes the damage to the pipework. And you can actually model it. So we don't need a huge density of high-speed sensors. We only need a few, and we can show them exactly how that transient passes through the system. And we know this is a unique function of our software, and that ability to actually model and track the transient. In this case, you can then we know the source of the transient, we know what causes it from the supply system, and we're now taking steps to rectify that. Okay, so over to you, Sir Ruben.
Thank you, Glenn. Next slide, please, David. Okay, great. So as you can see, the graphic there is quite revealing in terms of the path of the pressure transient. So what we decided to do is we decided to check whether the path of the transient was actually causing significant damage. So what you see on this slide here is a plot of all the leaks within this DMA, spatially plotted over the last 3 years. And when you look at it, there isn't actually anything particularly significant coming out at you. But when we ordered them in terms of the largest leaks found over the last 3 years, the largest leaks were actually found directly in the path of that pressure transient wave. So what we began to then immediately see here is there is a direct link between the pressure transient wave coming into this DMA and the largest burst found within the actual DMA itself. So it actually tells, or the digital twin in this scenario here can actually tell you where the leaks are most likely to occur, because we've got to the root cause of the leakage within this DMA. Over to you, Glenn.
Okay, thanks. So I think it's jumped to one too many.
Jumped the slide.
No.
Is it coming back? Okay, so I'll talk to you guys. So we're talking next about remodeling. So one of the issues we found was we found a problem, and what can we do to rectify it? So the issue with this DMA, as David mentioned, is it's quite hilly. So first of all, one thing our twin can do is actually try and visualize the DMA and visualize how the elevations change. I think it's gone forward again one too many, David. I'm still getting the.
No, it's not. This is the next one, Glenn.
Oh, is it? Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Carry on. Anyhow, so basically we've remodeled the DMA, and we've realized that there's certain things we can do. So first of all, we can actually change the way the DMA operates. So you can actually create a sub DMA within this DMA. So we've actually halved the pressures in some of the areas by actually closing around 10 valves in the DMA and dropping the operating pressures. So we now have half the DMA supplied from 1 PRV and the other half by 2 PRVs. Straight away, that's half the operating pressures. So more importantly, as well as reducing the leakage or the background leakage, it actually also allows us to minimize the damage that the pressure transients caused. And the great advantage of the twin is that we can actually use that to actually see what will happen. You can test out ideas and solutions. So rather than going out in the field and thinking, well, what will happen if I try and do this? You can test out solutions. You can optioneer it. You can do whatever you want and test out without actually breaking the real system. And that's our real strength, is then the solution. So it's about not just about find and fix leaks. It's about finding out what's causing the leaks, in this case, the pressure transients, eliminating the root cause of the problem, but actually then also reconfiguring the DMA so to reduce leakage in the long term. And then after that, we can then focus on other areas. I'll hand over to you now, Sir Ruben, for the acoustic bit.
Thank you. David, I think this is my slide, so okay. No need to move it forward.
All right.
Okay, brilliant. So one of the powers of the digital twin, I've heard a lot over the course of today about integrating data and having it all into one place. So you see a couple of examples of anomalies which we've spotted through the data sets and via the twin, which normally wouldn't have been spotted. So on the graph on the left-hand side is a user which is drawing about 2 liters a second out of this network. Now it's buried in one of the metadata, and when we came across it, it actually flagged that this user probably has an incorrect or giving us an incorrect demand allocation, thereby possibly being incorrectly assessed as leakage within the DMA. And it's possible to actually draw these kind of anomalies into the twin, so the twin can actually identify these patterns and bring them to the forefront. The next two graphs you see there are actually taken from our acoustic loggers, which are provided by Halma Water. So David mentions we've got 26,000 of these devices across about over 300 DMAs within Thames, and this DMA alone has probably about 400 loggers. So the aspiration, and we're currently working on this now, is to integrate points of interest through auto-correlating acoustic loggers, and we've done trials with both Halma and Guterman, and pulling that together with our pressure data anomalies. So you kind of get the validation of the points of interest before you dispatch leakage teams. Now, the aspiration from here is, like you can see on the far right-hand side, where you've got a usage heat map, is to potentially create a leakage heat map of the DMA and toggle between the two. So you can see then direct relationships between what our smart meters are telling us and what our leakage devices are also telling us, to get a full picture of what's going on within this DMA. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, so I'd like to talk about tangibles. It's okay, it's already got talking about some sort of pilot we had, but what's it actually delivered? What does it actually do? Well, first of all, I think one of the best benefits of this is we return clean and accurate GIS data back to Thames, so they know then that the asset data they've got is correct. And also it gives a live pressure, the pressures and flow, live picture of pressure and flows throughout the DMA. And that itself is an easy statement to make, but our twin isn't something that you just sits offline and every now and again you put some data through it. It runs live and it's designed to run continuously. And the hardest thing with designing a real-time simulator is actually having it continually running and dealing with data and bad data and having filters in to handle bad data so you don't get the garbage in, garbage out. So our strength of our simulator at the start is our ability to ensure that we're only driving it with data. And this technology for real time comes from the oil and gas industry. So these simulators have been in use in oil and gas assets all over the world. In fact, most oil and gas lines coming into the UK have our twin sat on it for network management and leak detection. So you get this live picture. At any one point, you can look at the pressure in any pipes, you can look at the velocity in any pipes, the flow rate in any pipes, and you can see how that changes over the day. We, as I mentioned, identified and tracked a damaging pressure transient entering the DMA from a control valve at Deptford, which we're now taking steps to mitigate. We identified a zonal valve that was passing, causing a breach. Again, that just created the error between the twin and reality, flagged a problem in this area, and investigations found the breach. We've identified a number of leaks and usage anomalies, which add up to over 1 megalitre per day. So we've already targeted 1 MLD in this DMA. And also we've developed the solution, as I mentioned, to reduce unaccounted for water by a further MLD by closing 10 valve and optimizing the PRVs so we can halve the pressures in the low elevation, high leakage areas of the system. But more importantly now, we're also actually taking steps with supply interruption to actually model critical valves. So what we can do is identify that for a typical DMA, you might find that only 15% of the valves are critical to prevent SI events. And we are now with Thames Water rolling this out onto other DMAs to actually ensure that the maintenance program of valves only needs to target your critical valves. So any SI events will only affect a very low number of customers. And I think one thing we haven't mentioned as well is actually behind all this, we also carried out some blind leak tests. So Shrewben's team at Morrison's undisclosed time to us actually cracked open a fire hydrant in the DMA and waited to see if the twin spotted it, and we got within the same street. So we've already independently tested this. So it's the ability for it to react to detect anomalies. But certainly from our point of view, the number of closed valves were found as being highly significant, which we're now taking steps to open to improve the hydraulics of the DMA. So it's the strength. It gives you a complete picture of everything within the DMA. So it's back over to you, Ruben.
Thanks, Glenn. It's the next slide. So yes, as Glenn mentioned, we had a lot of fun with that little experiment where I had to test Glenn's digital twin, or our digital twin, I should say, to see whether he could actually pick up those hydrant flushes, which he did do successfully. So pretty amazing. So what are we doing in the future, or what else can we do with the digital twin? So what you can see on your left-hand side is if we had this DMA from scratch and we're doing conventional leak detection, we'd go through a process of what we like to term high-definition step testing, which is to step down this DMA into small chunks and find leaks and compare them with what consumption is going through that actual DMA. the hope in the future is actually we can do away with that kind of technique. So we won't have the sort of violent interaction which may be caused through step testing, and actually find leaks through pressure drops or pressure deltas, and actually follow the water around to the leaks. So you can't see it quite clearly on that graphic there, but what the digital twin is modeling is actually the direction of water through all our pipes. Now, if you know what the expected pressures are on each of the and every one of those pipes, and you can sample the flow of water going through the pipes, you can then begin to see where leaks could be. And in theory, you could join the dots and actually eventually find your big to medium-sized leakage. The other element, obviously, is to bring through all our data sets into one area. So what we're trying to do is to also see whether we can measure the size of the leaks, so you can prioritize the leaks in terms of size, and also the time it occurs by looking at your nightline increases or your pressure deltas, all at a particular moment in time, to see where the significant events occur. And also another very good innovation we've done recently, which has been modeled through the digital twin, is to check all our critical valves within the DMA. So if we're trying to mitigate supply interruptions, we can actually go through the DMA and say, rather than checking 100% of all the valves within the DMA, we only have to check now, on average at the moment, 20% of the valves, to minimize significant supply interruptions and reduce the time of that actual interruption is, because the valves have already been pre-checked. Thank you. Next slide.
So the last couple of slides from me, just to round it off before we start taking questions. So I'm going to just highlight how much the digital twin utilizes all our existing data with a couple of extra loggers. So it pulls in the data from our massive estate of smart meters, GIS, SCADA, network assets, so our pressure management, our district meters, zonal meters, all the other telemetry that all the water companies have got spread across their networks. It just uses all that data and pulls it into a single hydraulic model and then geographically represents it. And the end users of that could be anyone from your system engineers and your leakage engineers to your demand planning, to your asset investment, network modeling, if you've got an incident, how you respond to that, your capital delivery investment requirements, technicians on the ground being able to see what's going to happen when they shut the valve, or if they need to rezone and make and take those decisions in the field without having to kind of second guess themselves. And then developer services for modeling new demand. So what Glenn didn't allude to is you can also put extra demand on a pipe to see what will happen to the pressures. So if you want to say in London, we want to build a big tower block, for example, you can simulate the flows and see what that does to the pressure, and then work out if you need any network reinforcement or whether there's sufficient demand. So the digital twin does a whole lot more than just leakage. It looks at the whole DMA health, as it were, and allows you to target your investment and your needs effectively. And the kind of the future within digital twin within Thames Water is, so we want the aspiration is we roll it so we've got a library of off-the-shelf digital twins, live off the shelf. So you can, if you've got an incident or you want to run something, you just go to that shelf, you pull it off, and you can work with it. We connect the digital twin to our data factory. So we've got a massive data factory, a data lake, and you'll hear that all the time, of all our data and a single source. So we just build an API pipeline into that lake, and the model then runs off that lake effectively. And we can model the what if scenario. So like I just said about developer services, we can simulate the demand, or we can, if we're doing capital investment or rezoning or anything like that, we can model that impact and model the impact to our customers. And we can target our efficient investment. So we can work out where we best spend our money, not just whole scale DMA replacement as we used to do, but we actually do the targeted bit that we need to do, rather than playing it safe and doing everything. You can target your investment. And we go to the root cause of leakage. So as Glenn spoke about, we found the root cause in this DMA happened to be a pressure transients coming from a treatment works, from a valve that not many people knew about. They used to open up when the pumps tripped. So now we know that, we can now fix that and stop that leakage. So the payoff is we'll have reduced leakage, and we'll see the payoff of that in a few years when we stop getting those big pressure transient leakage, and ultimately improve our service to our customers by being in control of the network, by knowing what's happening, by seeing things before they become an issue. So we'll be able to see that burst developing before it blows up, before the customers get no water, before anyone else highlights that issue to us. We'll have a planned, controlled method to deal with that burst. And that's ultimately improving our SI score and our service to our customers. And that's it. Thank you very much. So
Well, thank you very much, David, Glyn, and Soroban. That's, again, fascinating presentation. We have a few questions here on the side. I have a similar question as for Portsmouth Informatics. Will you be rolling this out across? You've just answered that one, yes. And do you think this will be the norm for managing networks in the future?
I can't answer that. Ultimately, I've seen so much benefit from rolling this out just in one DMA. And whenever I brief anyone in Thames Water, so I briefed it to the exec on Friday, and they said to me they want me to roll it out across the whole of the business. So it's very much in its infant stages at the moment. But I think my own gut feel is it will lead to massive service improvements and visibility when you know what's happening across your network and make early interventions. So yeah, I can see that being the future.
This will be the future. Okay. From Mikael Wilmot, again, another cracking presentation. What effort did it take to initially cleanse or validate the data? Soroban mentioned having to sort out floating pipes. Did most of the initial validation require field surveys?
So initially, it sounds a big exercise, but no, the vast majority of it was just actually something that we did in the office, and I have a team of 40 hydraulic engineers, and all they do day in, day out is build and manipulate and calibrate models. So most of the work was just it was quite obvious. There was one or two questions we have, and that's when it was great with this collaboration, because I could just turn to Ruben and say, can you go and have a look at this valve? We think it's closed, and he's deployed a site team, and sure enough, we'd find out that it was closed. So I'd say probably 95% was done from the office, and then the 5%, the difficult bit, we then just pass over to Morrison, and they get back to us with that.
And the brilliant thing I'd just like to add to that as well is Glyn has directed our teams pretty much, or Glyn's team, or should I say the digital twin has directed our teams on site. So we did find when we looked at stuff hydraulically, we did find pipes which we thought were not tied in, actually tied in at either ends of the streets, and we actually have currently found about 5 or 6 shut valves, causing significant circulation issues within the DMA, which are in the process of getting opened up. So that's all come from actually the pressure anomalies we're spotting within the DMA itself not making sense. Very often they could be misconstrued as leakage, but they also do highlight severe hydraulic issues like shut valves within the DMA as well. So that is an added benefit there.
Great, thank you. Chris Rees asks, thanks for the presentation all. Is the plan to roll this out to all DMAs as an anomaly detection system, or is it to be targeted at those with specific issues?
In our initial trial, when I briefed this to the exec last week, their indications were they want me to roll it out to the top 20 leakiest DMAs as a leak detection tool, and then across the business, across all DMAs. But it's all subsequent, all depends on the success of the trial. But the aspiration is we roll it across as an anomaly detection tool, an early warning type tool as well.
Great. And last question we have here, Paul Taylor. Do you need to have real-time customer meter data? Will the model give effective results?
Should I take that one? So yeah, it's a good question. At the moment, Thames are on a mass deployment, but not every property has a smart meter. So the advantage of this is where it's unmetered. We've actually found that if we take the smart meter data and take an average of all the smart metered properties and apply that to unmetered properties, you actually get a really good match with the twin. So our plan is not to actually drive it with continual smart meter data, but we would have a periodic refresh, maybe once a week. You get a new batch of smart meter data to account for seasonal changes, and then update it that way. So yeah, the model still works very, very effectively if we don't have smart meter data. The fact that we do have customer data, though, it's fantastic. I mean, it really is. And it all credit to Thames. As soon as they identified the amount of data they had available that was sat there relatively unused, and they were straight away on board with this to actually find a way to bring it all together and actually find a way to actually take all this data and then view it very, very simplistically. And for that, they obviously spoke to ourselves. And as I said, this tool we've got is, whilst it's new to this level of use in the UK, it's proven worldwide. And for example, we're embarking on a twin of the whole of Qatar next. So we just received a contract to build one model of the whole of the country, every single pipe in Qatar, will now be driven into our twin. So we are at the cutting edge of this technology, and Thames have straight away, because of our history with Thames, and we've worked with Thames for, as I said, 50 years, that, you know, they were very keen to actually bring this into their asset base, realizing that it will just give a very clear and understandable picture of the performance of their assets. So then they can do the difficult bits, as far as I'm concerned, which is actually sorting out the problems.
Okay, and I think probably the last question we have time for today, and I think this is one for you, David. You've indicated in your presentation that to roll out this digital twin, you had a lot of data already available to you, so it didn't require as much investment as potentially people think it needs. However, has this required significant capital investment?
The trial has been relatively low cost, so we're trying to keep the cost to a minimum. The only additional cost we've had to buy some NB-IoT pressure loggers, which we've only bought a handful of those just to supplement the network for a part of the loggers, but we didn't require any capital investment as part of this trial, no.
All right, very good. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
David, Glyn, and Sarabhan, thank you.